Hi, teaching staff. How are you all? This year, I want to make a screencastify for all of us to talk about letters of recommendation and how we can make them effective and help our students get accepted to university. So I've been going to a lot of webinars since we've been in COVID, and I got the slides I basically copied from a University of Chicago webinar and an NYU Abu Dhabi. So I'm going to be using their information and giving some hints of my own as we go along. So let me move ahead. So what can letters recommendation do for a student? So one, if they're above the bubble, if they're like a very, very strong applicant, it can basically just like add them to being like that fabulous student that they do see them in their application. So it distinguishes how highly recommended they are. So for our super stellar students, an letter of recommendation can get them to be selected over other very strong candidates. Okay, if the student's on the bubble, a letter of recommendation, they can use what you've said about the student in committee to try to convince the rest of the committee to accept a student. So it can really help them. And then if a student's below the bubble, like let's say they have lower GPA than what they're looking for and stuff like that, you can give kind of like a view of the student that might show them why they could maybe want to accept them, even if they're not highly qualified when they're looking at the academic side of things, but maybe they're fabulous and a deep thinker and stuff like that. And that can show them that maybe they should take a risk on the student. So they can be helpful in getting a student accepted to a school. And types of recommendations. What we hope that most students are writing are positive letters. The positive letters would be, sorry, let me go back. The positive letters would be something that would, giving great examples of students, glowing, excited about a student, using the word usage model for all students, the best ever, best in 10 years that I've seen, good adjectives and lots of examples, and then positive tone. And you add additional information that they might not find on the actual application, and you share their strengths. A neutral one could be that it doesn't help or hurt a student, and it doesn't differentiate a student from another one. So it's typically restates the obvious, kind of like what is on what's on their transcripts, what classes they've taken, all those things. Then a negative is one that provides examples that are not glowing or positive and shares irrelevant weaknesses. And yes, they do appreciate your honesty. Personally, my opinion is that if you are going to write a negative letter about a student, the way you could word it to a student if they ask you and you're not fond of writing a letter for them, you don't like the idea, is to tell them, like, do you have any other teachers that you could ask? And I've told students, if a teacher tells you that, then you should like ask someone else. That's a sign that they're trying to say, I might not write you the strongest letter. So it's okay to say to that to a student, would it not be, do you not have any other options to ask for a letter? So to hopefully get the best option possible. So writing a letter of recommendation, all teachers, you start with a formal greeting. Usually what I start with is Dear Admissions Team. Why is this? Because if they're applying on the Common App or even to the UC system or the Cal State system, they're typically applying to multiple schools. So if you say Dear MIT Admissions Team, and they're not reading it from MIT, it could be like, well, that's kind of uncomfortable. So make it kind of a general greeting, but definitely formal. So I always put Dear College Admissions Team or Dear Admissions Team, something like that. Use the school or business letterhead whenever possible. I can get that for you or share it with you if you need it, a digital form that is in Google Docs. Make sure you know the student well. Meet with them and understand what their future focus is. The students do have their biographical sketch that I've asked them to complete, so you can ask them for it. Some are more complete than others. So I would read that over, and usually that will help give some perspective on the student and help with some details. And then it's okay to suggest someone else write their letter if you don't feel qualified, like I already mentioned. Let the student know as soon as possible if you don't feel comfortable writing it. So writing tips, when you're sitting down to write the letter, what you should do. Definitely share some anecdotes. Avoid restating what they already have. If you're going to mention that they took an AP class with you, then it should be like, what did they do in that AP class? Okay, not they got a 4 or 5 on the test. They know that. What was it that they did that made them shine in that class? Share anecdotes that will make the student come to life. So what did they look like in your classroom? Focus on contributions to the school, in your learning environment, in the community that you've actually seen them do. Be descriptive. Think of adjectives that come to mind and favorite memories. Humanize your students. Consider comparing first impressions to current ones. So if they've grown and you've seen it mature. And be clear in comparisons. Entire class. Are they the best entire class or in your career? Be careful when you're saying they're the best student you've ever taught or the strongest student you've ever taught. Because if you send multiple letters and you write the same thing about multiple students, they're not going to believe your word. So it really should truly be the best you've seen. Okay? That's really important. So for your teacher letter of recommendation, you can touch upon behavior and participation, performance and meeting expectations, and then fill it with anecdotal expectations. So if you're going to say like, this student is a pleasure to have in class because they're dynamic and enjoy interacting with their peers, give an example of how they interact with it. Oh, like whenever we play a game in class, they always volunteer to be the person that runs it, or they're helping students if they're not understanding. They'll offer to help them and help them understand the content. Make sure you're giving those specific examples. And then contextualize the performance within the class. So especially like, let's say they ask you to write a letter, but they didn't do great in your class, but you know that they worked really hard and struggled through it and battled. You can write those things, that they communicated with me, that they were advocates for themselves, stuff like that. So you can cover topics such as competitiveness, drive, love of learning, ability to work with others, influence on peers, preferred learning style, creativity, and ability to deal with uncertainty. That could be a good one for this year and last year. Integrity, risk-taking, notable skills, engagement, independence. All these things could be topics that you focus on for the students. Academic sides that you could talk academic things you could talk about is their performance, intellectual ability, intensity of curriculum. Like if you've taught them a couple times, like for example, in our honors chem and AP chem, or those types of classes that have honors and then APs. Creativity, skills with writing and speaking. Have they given any really interesting presentations? What was the presentation about? Did they choose an interesting research topic for a project? Analytical and problem solving skills, challenges and seeking and how competitive they are, how engaged in the class are they driven, are they independent? And then for their characteristics, you could talk about respect, collaboration, leadership, maturity, accepting differences of thoughts and opinions. This, of course, is really good with our student population because it is so similar. The students are so similar. Risk takers, work ethic, resiliency, academic integrity, honesty, and treatment of others. If the students have been suspended, for example, in the Common App, the student does have to report that, and I also report it. So there was a situation where they did get suspended for something, it is reported. And the students do have a chance, an opportunity to talk about it. Now I'd like to show you some examples so you can see some different letters that University of Chicago and NYU provided to me in these workshops. So this is a letter that was sent. Brian was in the top 5 in my class consistently, is certainly motivated to study. His character and personality are fine. Brian is an excellent student, hard worker, and has above average reasoning ability. This is probably a very neutral letter, if not negative, because the person really didn't write much about the student, didn't give any examples, didn't give any meat. There's no meat there. This I'd say is not very good. This one is a very interesting one because it's also a neutral one. So here you can see, this is what I want to point out here. She's ranked 12 in her class. She's got this GPA. She's taken honors and AP classes. That is something that really they can look on her transcript and see. Like, they don't have, this is not something that you need to write. I've never known her to be dishonest or trustworthy. Once on a paper exam, I made a grading error. She brought this to my attention. So that's like a nice example. This would be a good sign of an example. But I would say that the space was used to talk about things that weren't necessarily going to help an admissions officer make a decision on her. This one is a very interesting one because it's very negative. So he looks great on paper. He's a national merit finalist. He's an excelled. He's a football player, but looks can be deceiving. Oh boy. When he asked me to write the letter, I was torn. On one hand, he does excel academically, but on the other hand, he has proven to be a very callous person who does not seem to have much respect for his peers or teachers. Furthermore, the fact that he asked me to write a letter recommending him suggests his own lack of self-awareness perpetuated by his limitless egotism. This is a terrible letter. I would hope, if this is how we felt about a student, that you would tell the student that you don't want to write the letter, because this was, of course, will not help their chances in college. As a counselor, I cannot say that I will not write a letter, but as a teacher, you do have that right. And I will be honest, there was a student since my time at ESFG that I did tell her that I thought it would be better for her to ask a different teacher, because we had not resolved an issue that had come up in class that was very upsetting to me. And she ended up going with someone else, which was the right choice, because I couldn't have written a strong letter for her. So I think it's really important to think about those things. And here's the last one, an example that I think this is a fabulous letter and shows everything that you need to do. I think if we look down at this paragraph, David's abiding interest, however, in computer science is computer science. He has developed a series of strands for use in providing computerized drill and review and basic skills and techniques of algebra and arithmetic, and has recently adapted these to other subjects. David's work in the area has been so original and significant that he has published a paper on it and has delivered several lectures to professionals in other parts of the country. This is a phenomenal accomplishment for anyone, especially a young man from the rural Midwest. You can see he's putting in context. He's giving specific examples. He's excited about this student. This is someone this would be a very exciting letter to be able to read. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and let me know if you need any more help. For those of you who might be asked to write the letter that your first language is in Spanish, now Google does have a translate thing on Google Docs that you can try to translate, and then I can always edit for you happily your letters. Thank you. Thank you so much for helping out our seniors, and thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's above and beyond what your job expectations are. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you and your work. Thank you.